Senator the Honorable Jane Nicholson, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, representing the Most Honorable Prime Minister, Mrs. Portia Simpson Miller, Honorable Ministers of Government, Dr. Aaron Kashyap, United Nations Resident Coordinator and UNDP Resident Representative, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, members of the United Nations family, permanent secretaries, members of the panel, colleagues from UNDP, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am Dr. Elsie Lawrence Shunoon, UNDP's Deputy Resident Representative and Chair for this afternoon's program.
I am Dr. Margaret Jones-Williams, Environment and Energy Advisor at the UNDP Country Office and South-South Cooperation Focal Point for the UNDP Office in Jamaica.
It is indeed a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and I would like to thank you all for taking the time to attend UNDP Jamaica's launch of the 2013 Human Development Report, or HDR as we normally call it. The HDR is a flagship publication for UNDP that has, since its production in 1990, contributed to the way development is now discussed and practiced. The 2013 report, entitled The Rise of the South, Human Progress in a Diverse World, was first launched on 14 March earlier this year in Mexico City, with the President of Mexico participating in the event.
The HDR highlights that there's a striking transformation of a large number of developing countries into dynamic, major economies with growing political influence, and that this shift is having a significant impact on human development progress. The 2013 report makes a significant contribution to development thinking, as it looks specifically at countries that raised their human development indices noticeably between 1990 and 2012 on both the income and non-income dimensions of human development. It describes specific drivers of development transformation and suggests future policy priorities that could help to sustain such momentum.
A firm believer in inclusive development, South-South collaboration, and public-private partnership, Dr. Aaron Kashyap sees the national launch of the HDR as an opportunity to engage key stakeholders and Southern partners in Jamaica's development efforts. Dr. Kashyap is a seasoned development practitioner, a strategic development and senior policy expert with a proven track record of success in planning, designing, donor and developing countries, as well as several multinational corporations on critical development issues, including mitigating and adapting to climate change, public-private partnerships to support viable entrepreneurship among the poor, and leadership for sustainable human development. Dr. Kashyap holds a PhD in economics and business administration, an MBA in international business and telecommunications, a postgraduate diploma in forestry, an MA in economics and international economics, an MS in physics and solid-state theory, and a BS in physics. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Aaron Kashyap, United Nations Resident Coordinator and UNDP Resident Representative.
Thank you very much, Madam Facilitators. Senator, the Honorable Arnold J. Nicholson, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Honorable Ministers of Government, Minister Golding, thank you for being here, Ambassador Urigala, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, my colleagues of the United Nations family, both who are currently with the UN and others who have retired, permanent secretaries and other colleagues from the government, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, A very good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of the United Nations, it is a pleasure for me to welcome you all to the launch of the 2013 Human Development Report, Rise of the South, Human Progress in a Diverse World in Jamaica. As Dr. Shanu mentioned earlier, while its global launch took place on March 14th, earlier this year in Mexico City by the President of Mexico, UNDP Jamaica is pleased to host the national launch of the HDR today. And we are indeed honored that you have chosen to be a part of this important event. Thank you for coming. The Human Development Report, or as I mentioned earlier, as we fondly call it, the HDR, is UNDP's flagship publication. It has and continues to contribute remarkably to the way development is now discussed and practiced. To quote the New York Times on the 20th anniversary of the HDR in 2010, it said, so far, only one measure has succeeded in challenging the hegemony of growth-centric thinking. This is known as the Human Development Index. As in previous HDRs, a key message of this report highlights that economic growth by itself does not translate into human development progress. As Helen Clark, UNDP's administrator, has also been highlighting this message in her various communications. She says equity, dignity, happiness, and sustainability are all fundamental to our lives, but absent in the gross development product. Progress needs to be defined and measured in a way that accounts for a broader picture of human development and its context. Equitable policies and meaningful investment in human capacities such as education, nutrition, health, and employment skills can enhance access to decent work and improve human quality of life. This year's HDR celebrates a remarkable event. It identifies over 40 countries in the developing world, referred to as the South, that by their unprecedented speed and scale of progress have become, for the first time in recent history, the driver of global economic growth and societal change. It is projected that by 2020, the combined economic output in 1990 purchasing power parity dollars of three of the key emerging economies alone, that's China, India, and Brazil, they will surpass that of the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, and Canada combined. While each of these over 40 countries has chosen its own distinct development pathway, led by its own unique history, the common characteristics that they share and the common challenges that they confront provide fresh insights and possibilities to undertake coherent policy reforms and help people across regions to effectively overcome shared human development challenges and replenish hope for a fairer and a better quality of life. The better than predicted achievements between 1990 to 2012 of these high-achieving countries, both in terms of income and non-income dimensions of human development, they've been led by three specific factors. First, most of these countries have had a proactive development state that has dynamically developed policies and taken the responsibility for the development of both public and private sectors. They have successfully tapped global markets and pursued inclusive growth by carefully and gradually integrating into the world economy based on their unique national circumstances and priorities. They have benefited from innovative social programs that have improved equitable access to education, healthcare, social protection, and legal empowerment. In fact, these countries increased their share of global goods trade from 25% to 47% between 1980 and 2010, led by trade within the South, which increased from less than 10% to over 25% in the past 30 years. And these countries are also increasingly important markets for the North. For example, in the past 5 years, the report notes, U.S. exports to OECD countries rose by 20%, but U.S. exports to Latin America and the Caribbean increased by more than 50%. Innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology partnerships, including in information and communication technologies, have thrived within the South itself, and it has enabled a greater number of people to influence decisions that impact their lives. In highlighting the innovative social programs as a hallmark of successful states, the HDR upholds the broader social and poverty reduction agenda of the South that embraces policies to address inequalities, institutional failures, social barriers, and personal vulnerabilities as central to promoting economic growth. This key message of the report is excellently illustrated by the initiative taken by Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York City. He who traveled to Mexico to study its Oportunidades program prior to launching Opportunity New York City Family Rewards. By the way, it's the first conditional cash program in the United States. Incidentally, such innovative social programs that also include Brazil's Bolsa Familia, another program whose lessons are included in the Design of Family Rewards initiative, cost less than 1% of GDP, much lesser than traditional in-kind social assistance. Excuse me. In the Latin America and the Caribbean region, Barbados, Chile, and Argentina are in the very high human development group. Jamaica is placed in the high human development group, and its current ranking at 85th out of 187 countries and territories is equal to that of Brazil. While Jamaica's HDI, the Human Development Index at 0.73, is below the average HDI for the region, which is at 0.741, it is above the world average of 0.694. However, if we incorporate inequalities in this Jamaican Human Development Index, it falls to 0.591, a loss of nearly 19% caused by inequality in the distribution of the dimension indices. The report offers several recommendations that can also serve well for Jamaica in its efforts to build upon its achievements to accomplish Vision 2030 Jamaica. As the policymakers in developing countries pursue ambitious and growing human development agendas that respond to complex global situations and conditions, including that of economic slowdown, while addressing their urgent national policy priorities, the report cautions the need to follow an inclusive and sustainable path that successfully tackles the challenges of demographic shifts by enabling greater participation of citizens, including youth, political and social exclusion to enhance equity, and environmental degradation. Fostering greater equity is fundamental in its own right, as well as for promoting human development. This was also an outcome of the recently completed national post-2015 consultations in Jamaica on the future we want for all. As the Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz also reminds us, to quote, "The evidence from history and from around the modern world is unequivocal. There comes a point when inequality spirals into economic dysfunction for the whole society, and when it does, even the rich pay a steep price." The report projects that targeted investments in girls' education promotes equity, reduce future child mortality, and lift human development. And there is ample evidence including from Brazil, Chile, and Mexico, that innovative social protection programs, including cash transfer programs, have not only helped to improve lives and livelihoods for poor and marginalized groups, they have also narrowed gaps in income, health, and education. The report calls for, 1, a greater global ambition on and commitment to tackling environmental degradation, and 2nd, innovative policies and programs to catalyze global action on the development threat of climate change. These are, I'm sure, a welcome recommendation, especially for the small and island developing states. We have witnessed vivid examples of the potential of adverse impacts of climate change to halt or even reverse human development gains that are made by countries of the South with the least adaptive capacity. The recommendations of the 2013 HDR present a promising opportunity to all of us in Jamaica to foster and facilitate South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation and advance inclusive development while ensuring that the development paths of the future are sustainable. We are profoundly grateful to you, sir, Senator the Honorable Arnold J. Nicholson, for joining us today to launch this report and adding the support of the government of Jamaica to its findings. We are also deeply appreciative to the Ambassador of Brazil, the High Commissioners of India and South Africa, and to the Director General of Planning Institute of Jamaica for agreeing to join the panel discussion and share their experiences in the national context to advance Jamaica's development vision and strategy. We are hopeful that today's discussions will contribute to advancing Jamaica's leadership vision for the Caribbean as it hosts the SIDS regional meeting in July in preparation for the global meeting in Apia, Samoa in 2014, which is also the International Year of Small Island Developing States. It would also provide an opportunity to the government as well as to the broader development community to jointly assess the value of an aid effectiveness strategy that would provide Jamaica with creative options to advance its vision and use its growing economic strength to lift a sustainable and inclusive development path for all. The UN and UNDP have had the privilege and pleasure to work together with the government of Jamaica to advance its work in key areas to enhance the quality of life of all Jamaicans, especially those that are vulnerable and marginalized. Honorable Minister, please be assured of a commitment to continue to strengthen this partnership, including by integrating recommendation of this new and very relevant Human Development Report and contribute towards your efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Once again, thank you very much to all of you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Kashyap, for highlighting the key elements of the 2013 HDR, the emerging concept of the rise of the South, and the message on the initiatives that have resulted in the success of these southern countries. The importance of equitable benefit sharing, access to health care, reduction of poverty, access to education, and the prevention of environmental degradation are all key aspects for human development.
By 2030, Latin America and the Caribbean will be home to 1 in 10 members of an emerging global middle class. Billions of people across the world are becoming increasingly educated, socially engaged, and internationally interconnected. 4 out of 5 countries with the largest number of Facebook users are in the South: Brazil, India, Indonesia, and Mexico. In the Caribbean region, Jamaica is without a doubt part of the rising South, positioned in the high human development category and ranked 85th together with Brazil.
The Latin America and Caribbean region has been playing a significant role in world development. In UNDP, this bureau, currently headed by Dr. Heraldo Munoz, who is the United Nations Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. Dr. Munoz will join us this evening via a video presentation to share with us the HDR perspectives on the region in general and on Jamaica in particular.
that have made impressive human development gains in recent years. The report analyzes a profound shift in global dynamics as a very significant number of developing countries transform themselves into vibrant emerging economies with a positive impact on human development progress around the world. Those key factors contribute to fast progress in such countries in all regions of the world, including Latin America and the Caribbean. More proactive states in development policies, greater interaction with global markets, and innovative social policy. A strong, proactive developmental state invests strongly in human capital and in favor of those people living in poverty or vulnerability. With a focus on education, health, and capacity building, states can expand access to decent work and sustain progress. Between 1990 and 2013, the average life expectancy in Latin America and the Caribbean rose from 68.2 to 74.7 years, which means that today we live 6 years and a half more than 20 years ago. Innovation in social programs is a hallmark of successful states. In Latin America and the Caribbean, governments are implementing conditional cash transfers programs to increase people's income and their access to health and education. Many of these efforts towards poverty and social inequality reduction have already proven effective. In Jamaica, the program of advancement through health and education, PATH, has been successful in increasing school attendance and the use of preventive health care for Jamaican children. Jamaica is without a doubt part of the rising South. Between 1980 and 2012, Jamaica's GNI per capita increased by about 43%. Life expectancy at birth increased by 2.8 years. Mean years of schooling by 4.4 years, and expected years of schooling by 2 years. According to the 2013 Human Development Report, Jamaica's HDI value for 2012 is 0.730, positioning the island in the high development category. Out of 187 other countries and territories, Jamaica shares the 85th rank with Brazil. At present, Jamaica's high debt, low economic growth, and high unemployment rates are a threat to human development. As Jamaica embarks on an extended fund facility with the IMF, the government is putting emphasis on a strong, proactive, and responsible state, developing policies for both the public and private sector. This report suggests enhancing equity, enabling voice and participating and confronting environmental challenges and managing demographic change in important areas to facilitate this. Policy inaction has a high cost, and the recommendations argue for greater policy ambition that characterizes a proactive development state with an ability to tap global markets and to realize social policy innovation. Jamaica has exhibited leadership by initiating a Department of Climate Change to minimize the adverse impacts of this major development threat on poor and marginalized communities by enhancing their adaptation capacities. To ensure sustainable economies and societies, new policies and structural changes are needed that align human development and climate change goals in low-emission, climate-resilient strategies and innovative public-private financing mechanisms that harness the wealth of knowledge, expertise, and development thinking in the South. This report advances calls for new institutions to facilitate regional integration and South-South cooperation. The Human Development Report also highlights the obligations to address environmental challenges. Sustainability is critical. Around 155 million people in Latin America and the Caribbean would live in extreme poverty in 2015 under the environmental disaster scenario examined in this report. The rise of the South is one of the most remarkable phenomena in the new global arena. It is changing the world as we know it and will change it even further in the future. UNDP will continue its work in order to invest in people's human development around the world. We will expand our efforts to eradicate extreme poverty, strengthen social protection mechanisms, and close historic gaps, such as inequality in terms of income and gender. Thank you very much.
Dr. Munoz has clearly articulated that the rise of the South is one of the most remarkable phenomena in the new global arena, and underscored UNDP's commitment to continue its work in order to invest in human development around the world. Dr. Munoz also noted that UNDP will expand efforts to eradicate extreme poverty, strengthen social protection mechanisms, and close historic gaps such as inequality in terms of income and gender.
Jamaica's National Development Plan, Vision 2030, was prepared in the midst of the global financial and economic crisis, which was recognized as the most serious such crisis since the Great Depression of 1929. Vision 2030 recognizes that Jamaica must continue to plan while operating within a very dynamic global context in order to make Jamaica, as Dr. Kashyap just reminded us, the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. As the guiding light for Jamaica's future, Vision 2030's effective implementation depends on Jamaica's leadership and ability to forge strategic alliances beyond its borders. The 2013 HDR provides specific examples on successful initiatives that could benefit the country.
Senator the Honorable A.J. Nicholson has been serving in Jamaican national politics since 1989 and is currently Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Senator Nicholson has had a long and distinguished career, having traveled from Jamaica to London to pursue his education at London University and to advance in the London Bar before returning to Jamaica to begin his practice. Senator Nicholson has been a member of the Jamaican Senate since 1998 and the legal advisor to the People's National Party since 1996. He was Jamaica's Minister of Legal Affairs from 1995 to 1998, Minister of Justice from 2000 to 2007, and Attorney General for 12 years. Senator Nicholson has been recognized as a champion of struggle for greater rights for the people of Jamaica and the Caribbean as a whole. In recognition of this, Senator Nicholson lectured a class on international human rights in the Caribbean at Stetson University College of Law in the United States of America in 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Senator A.J. Nicholson to deliver his keynote address.
Madam co-hosts, colleague minister, Mr. President of the Senate, Ambassador Urigala, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Dr. Arun Kashyap, UN Resident Coordinator, UNDP Resident Representative, other members of the Diplomatic Corps, and heads of international organizations, and members of the Consular Corps, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be here today for the launch of the 2013 Human Development Report entitled The Rise of the South, Human Progress in a Diverse World. I would wish to thank the United Nations Development Programme for arranging the formal launch of the report here in Jamaica. I'm particularly pleased that Dr. Geraldo Munoz Assistant Secretary General and Assistant Administrator and Director of the Regional Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean of the United Nations Development Program, has joined us via video for this occasion. I greet him most warmly on behalf of the government of Jamaica. His message underscores the importance placed by the UNDP on Jamaica's continued development. I would like to recognize the instrumental role played by the UNDP in providing critical support to Jamaica through its country program outlined in the United Nations Development Assistance Framework. The country program action plan for 2012 to 2016 provides development assistance in poverty reduction and for the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals. It also contains actions to promote democratic governance, environmental sustainability, and energy security. We recognize with appreciation the stewardship of the United Nations Resident Coordinator and UNDP Resident Representative, Dr. Kashyap, and the country team. Their work has served to strengthen national capacity building, enable technology transfer, and allow for advocacy on key developmental issues. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2013 Human Development Report examines the economic rise of the group of developing countries historically described as being of the South. Changing economic tides, bolstered by innovations in technology, financing, and other means of production, have contributed to the almost phenomenal development of key countries in the South. And clearly, Dr. Kashyap, it bears repeating, the rapid development strides by the titans of the South, among them China, India, Brazil, and I would dare to say South Africa, provide a renewed sense of optimism that the quest for development is not reserved for a few, but can be achieved by many. The Human Development Report reminds us that the quest for development has to be considered in all its aspects. This involves a broader definition of development, which puts humans at the center. Development, therefore, becomes far more than numbers on a balance sheet, as impressive as these may be, but also includes other indicators such as gender, education, poverty, and access to health and social services. These indicators reflect the human element of the development equation. And as has been pointed out by the Honorable Prime Minister, and she would never forgive me if I didn't say this, the conversation has to be about the balancing of people's lives while balancing the books. It is within this framework that the findings of the 2013 Human Development Report are both pertinent and relevant. I pause here to note that between 1980 and 2012, Jamaica's HDI rose by 0.5% annually from 0.612 to 0.730 today, which gives the country a rank of 85 out of 187 countries with comparable data. In comparison, the HDI of Latin America and the Caribbean as a region increased from 0.574 in 1980 to 0.741. Jamaica, as has been said, is described as a country with high human development and currently ranks equal with Brazil. But we dare not be satisfied. There is much work to be done. We must continue to build on the advances that we have made and embark on a growth agenda characterized by investments in infrastructure, agriculture, transportation, and other key sectors of the economy. The positioning of Jamaica as a global logistics hub, and notable improvements in public service delivery. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, we have remarked on the phenomenal growth of some countries of the South. Nonetheless, it is astounding that by 2020, we have heard Dr. Kashyap say that the combined economic output of Brazil, China, and India is expected to surpass the traditional countries of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. While it is recognized that this economic growth is largely due to advances in trade and technology, bolstered by partnerships among countries of the South, it is also noteworthy that much of this development has been and will be driven by policies aimed at eradicating poverty, stimulating employment and entrepreneurial creativity, and through a strengthening of social policy approaches. This offers a different developmental perspective for developing countries, which I dare say have been suffering the effects of indigestion after decades of being fed a constant diet of the Washington Consensus and market liberalization as the main drivers of growth. We have now been presented with a paradigmatic shift in developmental thinking. This approach has not escaped us in Jamaica, which, after almost 51 years of independence, is embarking on a path that takes into account GDP growth as well as job creation and human development, with attention being paid to the most vulnerable in our society. As part of this commitment, in spite of the rigorous IMF program, space has been provided for a minimum level of support for social intervention programs to benefit the most vulnerable. This is in keeping with the approach by the government to implement policies which are pro-poor and which allow for a focus on education, nutrition, and employment as an investment in the country's sustained development and equitable growth. I have also taken note that in addition to the emphasis on the giants of the South, there has been developmental gains in those countries which could perhaps be considered as the middle powers of the South, namely Indonesia, Turkey, South Africa, Mexico, and others. This is significant and points to the benefits to be gained by encouraging South-South cooperation, a concept espoused by Jamaica since the 1970s in areas such as technology transfer, trade, investment, and development financing. In other words, there is a renewed optimism underscored in the report that the major advances made by the South, due in part to South-South cooperation, are achievable and can be broadened through increased partnerships and cooperation among developing countries. The rise of the South means that there must be corresponding changes in economic and political governance in the real centers of decision-making, such as the United Nations Security Council and in the multilateral financial institutions. It is even more urgent that these and other institutions become more representative of the global economic power shifts and become more inclusive and equitable in their decision-making. In addition, it needs to be highlighted that while the South-South cooperation can be a driver towards development, this should not, particularly in the short term, seek to replace North-South avenues of cooperation, they still remain significant for a number of our developing countries. Linked to this are the trade dimensions, especially in the context of the WTO, where talks have become increasingly complex. We are confident that under the new leadership of the WTO, by a representative of the South, renewed vigor and priority will be placed on the multilateral trading system, which will allow for the interests of small developing countries to be taken into account, enabling them to share in the gains from world trade. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the report identifies 4 areas of focus that are critical to development. These are enhancing equity, including in the gender dimension, enabling greater voice and participation of citizens, including youth, confronting environmental pressures, and managing demographic change. These areas are of direct relevance to small island developing states, the other powers of the South. And might I pause? I am not shy or coy in moving forward to assist in having small states and what they stand for and what they should mean in this world placed squarely on the global economic and trade agenda. Why? Not since slavery has the interests of small states been taken into account on that score. The challenges faced by small island developing states, particularly those of the Caribbean, in achieving real economic and social growth are well known. They include vulnerability to climate change and natural disasters, which within minutes, hours, can wipe out large percentages of the GDP of small economies. They also encompass constant migration flows, aging populations, youth employment, indeed unemployment, and citizen insecurity. These challenges underscore the rank vulnerabilities faced by this group of countries and the inequities they face in the development scorecard. Small island developing states strive to implement the 1994 Barbados Program of Action and the 2005 Mauritius Strategy for the further implementation of the Barbados Program of Action, but experience constraints based on size and heterogeneous levels of development. This is particularly marked in relation to the treatment given to the group of upper middle-income countries, where little or no recognition is afforded to the vulnerabilities experienced as small island developing states. To put this in context, it is estimated that the Latin American and Caribbean region will experience GDP growth of approximately 4% in 2013, which can be considered as positive for the region as a whole. But when the data is disaggregated, the Caribbean is in fact in a less favorable position than their Latin American counterparts, as high levels of debt have narrowed the options available for growth. Our limited fiscal space has severely constrained our capacity to direct funds to key areas of the economy, including health and education, just raising the risk of declining levels of equity. This is a situation that needs attention, including by the countries of the South, if SIDS are to benefit meaningfully from the expected development gains outlined in the report. As the international community discusses the post-2015 development agenda, it is imperative that the concerns of small island developing states are considered in an inclusive and proactive manner. Our concerns must be at the center, at the heart of the discussion on whether the Millennium Development Goals should be continued, on the ways in which to elaborate a suite of sustainable development goals, as well as the reform of the institutional mechanisms which will guide the multilateral development process. After all, as a grouping of 43 member states and observers, SIDS comprise a significant percentage of the global South. The 37 SIDS, which are members of the United Nations, represent 28% of developing countries and nearly 20% of the United Nations membership as a whole. For the South to be considered a significant driver of economic progress and growth, this group of countries, as well as least developed countries, have to be brought more meaningfully into the developmental equation. And so, the exchange of best practices and sharing of knowledge and expertise will also go a far way in assisting development among countries of the South. Mechanisms will have to be developed to allow for such exchanges in an equitable and accessible manner. In addition, the thinking of countries of the South will have to adopt and adapt to take account of the new realities outlined in the report, placing regional integration among countries of the South, as well as developmental cooperation, capacity building, technology transfer, investment and innovation among the priority considerations on this agenda. Above all, it is clear that we need to be fully equipped to take advantage of the changes in global economic and political dynamics, or risk marginalization on the periphery. So I wish to commend the UNDP for the role it has played in facilitating the publication of another human development report, which has provided independent and thought-provoking analyses on development. On behalf of the government of Jamaica, it gives me great pleasure to officially launch in Jamaica the 2013 Human Development Report, The Rise of the South, Human Progress in a Diverse World. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nicholson, for your stimulating keynote address and for the recognition of the instrumental role played by the UNDP in providing critical support to Jamaica through its country program, as outlined in the United Nations Development Assistance Framework. You have rightly pointed out that development is more than just an array of impressive numbers on a balance sheet, and that the reality of indicators such as gender, education, poverty, access to health, and social services reflect the human element of the development equation.
As has already been emphasized, the 2013 HDR identifies more than 40 countries in the developing world that have done better than expected in the recent decades, with their progress accelerating markedly over the past 10 years. The report analyzes the causes and consequences of these countries' achievements and the challenges that they face today and in the coming decades. It presents opportunities for other countries to tap on global markets, promote innovative social policies and programs, and embrace South-South cooperation as a means to advance in human development.
Each of the countries highlighted in the 2013 HDR has its own unique history and has chosen its own distinct development pathway. Yet these countries share important characteristics and face many of the same challenges. They are also increasingly interconnected and interdependent. We will now view a short video which summarizes the key findings of the 2013 HDR.
The 2013 Human Development Report is about the rise of the South and human progress in a diverse world. It tells the story of a profound shift in global dynamic driven by the fast-rising new powers of the developing world. For the first time in 2 centuries, the biggest developing economies, Brazil, China, and India, are now producing nearly the same share of world output as the leading industrial countries of Europe and North America. Projections in the report show that by 2020, these 3 countries together will surpass those traditional industrial powers, and they will keep growing for decades to come. By 2030, 80% of the world's middle class will live in today's developing countries. The South is growing and fast. Living standards are also rising fast. The Industrial Revolution sparked a new era of economic growth, directly affecting at least 100 million Europeans and North Americans in the early 19th century. But today, in the 21st century, the South is reaching new heights of human development and economic productivity, changing the lives of billions of people throughout the world. The new South is shaking up existing global institutions, creating new ones, and generating new forms of collaborations between regions and nations. 3 common drivers of development have emerged: a proactive developmental state, tapping global markets, and determined social policies. Poverty reduction, women's empowerment, and new technologies have shown to be prominent engines of change. Homegrown social programs allowed Brazil to reduce its population living on less than $1.25 a day. In Rwanda, 52% of parliamentarians are women. These representatives can now effect real change in gender policy. And in Ghana, 61% of cocoa farmers now own mobile phones. The fast-growing telecom sector has allowed them to better respond to changing prices and supplies. In the past 2 decades, developing countries have nearly doubled their share of the world merchandise trade. This has created new business models and offered developing countries access to affordable goods. But the momentum lies on fragile ground. Even for higher achieving countries, future success is not guaranteed. Nations of the South face the shared challenges of an aging population, climate change, political participation, and social equality. As populations become more educated, there is an increasing need to create employment opportunities, and the expansion of education must go hand in hand with job creation. Future environmental and natural disasters may pose higher threats to the poorest countries and communities. 3.1 billion more people could live in extreme poverty by 2050 if sustainability and the environment are not addressed. But countries in the South can maintain their rapid growth. To do that, they must collaborate to enhance equity, enable voice and participation, confront environmental pressures, and manage demographic changes. The South's progress is immensely positive worldwide. Other developing nations can follow the trail blazed by the leaders of the South today. The emerging nations of the South still need the North, and increasingly, the North will need the South, leading to greater cooperation for greater human development.
At this point, UNDP will present a copy of the 2013 HDR to the government of Jamaica. Senator Nicholson, Dr. Kashyap, would you please come forward?
As previously noted, Jamaica is currently ranked 85th in the world, which is just above the halfway mark. Jamaica has the potential to improve its rank in the next HDR cycle. The lessons to learn from the Rising South include expanding international relationships and anti-poverty programs as done by Brazil, reshaping the future with entrepreneurial creativity and social policy innovation as done by India, and each year steadily improving in HDI ranks as evidenced by South Africa.
The HDR confirmed that economic growth and human growth are inextricably linked. In addition, government investment in key social sectors is crucial in moving nations forward. Considering the theme of the 2013 HDR, The Rise of the South, Human Progress in a Diverse World, UNDP has invited some southern countries highlighted in the 2013 HDR to share particular perspectives on their development as reported in the HDR. We would like to thank Their Excellencies, the Ambassador of Brazil, and the High Commissioners of India and South Africa for joining us this afternoon for the panel discussion. We would also like to thank Mr. Colin Bullock, Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, for representing the Jamaican perspective on the panel. The panel discussion will be moderated by Cliff Hughes, Chairman and Executive Producer of Nationwide 90 FM. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our distinguished panel, Ambassador of Brazil, Mr. Antonio Francisco da Costa e Silva, High Commissioner of India, Mr. Pratap Singh, High Commissioner of South Africa, Ms. Matu Joyini, Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, Mr. Colin Bullock, and the moderator for the panel, Mr. Cliff Hughes.
It is still afternoon, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In 15 minutes, it will be evening. Welcome to our August panel. 3 ambassadors and the Director General, one of Jamaica's top technocrats, Mr. Colin Bullock. My job is very easy this evening. I'll be a mere traffic cop. I'll pose the questions and insist that we get answers. Okay? And get answers that are concise and very, very insightful. You have been introduced to the members of the panel. They represent the star performers of the 2013 HDR, Brazil, India, South Africa, and I see representatives of China here, and of course Jamaica, who is represented by Mr. Bullock. I'm going to begin with the Brazilian ambassador by asking him a simple question. How did Brazil do this? Reducing poverty by 25% in such a short period of time. Ambassador.
Well, thank you very much. The question is a bit vast, but I would say that, and quoting the Prime Minister, okay. Can you hear me now? Yes. The question is complex, but basically I believe that the UNDP report addresses the issue, and I think Minister Nicholson also, by quoting the Prime Minister, also pointed out to the path that you need to see development from a different perspective. And you need to look into the idea of lives or empowering lives or actually concentrating on the human factor of development, and in particularly on those citizens or those who are excluded from citizenship the poor and the vulnerable. And I think that Brazil, in the last almost 20 years, has had a sequence of governments who have tried to pursue this idea in two phases. The first phase is obviously combating inflation, high inflation, because inflation is a tax on the poor. And when you solve the inflationary spiral, you actually start by allowing the poor to see their value stabilized, and then pursuing social, active, very active social policies, particularly with direct transfer of resources to the poor, looking into the idea that you have to allow them to have the capacity to raise themselves out of poverty.
How is this organized, direct transfers to the poor?
Well, the first idea was what we call Bolsa Escola, the school allowance that will evolve for the Bolsa Familia, the family allowance. And currently, the new government of President Rousseff, we have gone into a more all-encompassing concept in which we're trying to integrate different social programs into one program. So we continue to have direct transfer for the poor, but we have family agriculture. We try to provide the idea that you need to address not only individuals excluded from citizenship and from participation of society, but you have to also address inequalities between urban and rural areas, inequalities between regions, and that needs to be with social programs that are integrated.
But what were the safeguards to prevent abuse, for example, from politicians or other non-state actors or state actors hijacking the process?
Well, the idea started there that you do the direct transfer, direct to the individual. There is no in-between. You actually transfer the resources directly to the individual. That's one way that we did this. And then on different programs, what we have done, as you know, Brazil is a federation, and with strong municipal participation, what we have done is try to integrate municipalities and states into these programs in order to have what I would say an integrated program between the federal government, the state governments, and the local government.
Okay. Let me bring in His Excellency Pratap Singh of India. India has had a long and distinguished tradition of parliamentary democracy, a population of over 1 billion, bedeviled by poverty and other challenges, but somehow it has been able to maintain the parliamentary democracy and at the same time taking millions out of poverty to the point you now have, 500 million people in the middle class. Tell me how you have been able to do that.
Well, in India, as you know, it's a multiracial society, I would say. But now all people in the country have come to realize that parliamentary democracy has provided them the best of opportunities to express their assertions. This way, all sections of society, they are putting up different kind of demands, and the state feels obliged to listen to them and to do something which they find that is in their interest. Mm-hmm. Also, there are different voices which sometimes don't agree with the agenda of the government. For that, a lot of discussion, dialogue, and consultation is done, and then final consensus is arrived within the parliament, and it is ensured that their interests are safeguarded. So each and every section has a feeling that this parliamentary democracy is a better platform for them to get their interest served by the authorities.
But not so long ago, just about 20 years ago, you were struggling. India was seen as one of the strugglers.
Yeah.
And you shifted in terms of your economic focus. What precipitated that shift, and what has been the result?
Well, in 1990, India embarked upon the process of economic reforms. Economy was in a very bad shape. The public sector, which are government organizations, particularly heavy industries, were doing very badly. They were inducing a lot of losses. they were inefficient and not were functioning according to the expectations. So economic reforms were introduced, adequate measures were put in place to ensure that economy or the sector, various sectors become more efficient and deliver according to the expectations of the people. This way, after privatization of these big industries and introducing private-public partnership in the country, India soon emerged as a center of rising industries and the destination of foreign direct investment, etc., etc.
What were the key winning industries or sectors for India?
Well, as I think most of the people in the world are aware, information technology sector was the sector which was on top. Along with this, other sectors were developed. A middle class contributed a lot to the emergence of information technology sector. Also, when this outsourcing jobs to India became another thriving industry, and it created great employment to the skilled people, to the well-educated people of the middle class, and then demands for other goods increased simultaneously. Housing sector developed very fast. Quality education was demanded more and more by the people. So educational sector has developed phenomenally. Simultaneously health center. There has been great expansion in the development of health center in India. Thousands institutes, medical colleges and universities have been opened. So these are the three sectors which have been on top.
All right. Let me bring in the High Commissioner from South Africa, the Ambassador, Matu Jaini. South Africa, only 19 years ago, we witnessed the end of apartheid and the release of Nelson Mandela from prison. The world held its breath for South Africa. How would it manage the process of racial reconciliation and keep its economy that was built under apartheid, one of the growing, stronger economies of South Africa? Tell me how you've been able to manage it, how you've been able to deliver the reconciliation while holding the economy together.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all the distinguished guests, and thank you for allowing me to share.
Yeah, pull it towards you. Right.
Saying thank you for allowing me to share the experience of South Africa with all of you this afternoon. 19 years old. Some will say we're still a teenager. Now, how we managed that is that even before the actual transition in 1994, that is when you have finally had the black government in power, you had the ruling party, the African National Congress, beginning to think about how are they going to manage this transition? How are we going to make sure that we deal with what apartheid has left for us, be it in the area of education, in the area of housing, or the inequalities that were still there. And we had no choice but to begin looking at ourselves as a developmental state and begin to come up with a program and a policy framework that deliberately thinks of how to shift and how to transfer the resources from the rich to the poor. And that's what we put in place. It was called the RDP, Reconstruction and Development Program. That was on the one hand. On the other hand, we looked at, and some of you will be familiar with it, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that had to look at the healing aspect of what apartheid had done, not only to black people, but to both black and white, and allow people to talk about what has happened, to ask for forgiveness to be given, and for reparations in some instances, but mostly it was for healing. So you had those two processes. But I think around growth in particular, the RDP was quite crucial. And we were very clear that it's not going to be growth alone, but we're going to look at growth and redistribution. And that's what the policy framework was really all about.
The role of leadership must have been absolutely vital. You were blessed to have a man called Nelson Mandela at the helm. Yeah?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you will remember that what he is known for is reconciliation. And just before the new administration, I mean, there were some people that had already packed their suitcases, have already put supplies to go under the bunkers, once the black government takes over. But of course, his policy and his approach was around nation building and reconciliation. And that went a long way in bringing South Africa to where it is today.
But you continue to have persistent problems, persistent challenges. The black majority, a significant portion of your population, beginning to question the effectiveness of the ANC in government in really making their lives better. Yes, housing continues to be a problem. Potable water continues to be a problem. Provision of electricity continues to be a problem. How are you managing? How are you coping with those?
If you look at where we were 18 years ago, be it on housing, electricity, the ones that you've mentioned, being it on education, on health, you'll find that in all those areas, less than around 20% of the black population had access to clean water, had access to housing, had access to electricity. Now, to be able to move in 18 years from that low base to where we are today is quite a lot of work. And where we are today, if you look at electricity, most of these areas we are just above 80%. Now, if you look at the population of South Africa, it's 51 million people, right? 51 million. So to move and be able to provide all these services for the 51 million, and you're at 80% after 18 years, there's 20%, 15% in different areas. And 20% of 50 million people is quite a number of people. And hence you will now and then see protests in South Africa, see what you're talking about, the dissatisfaction, and we're talking about that percentage that hasn't yet received the services that we are talking about.
How are you doing in closing the income gap, the economic gap between the white elite of the society and the black poor and the rising black middle class?
That has moved. But if you look at where we were in 1993, black family household income was around 22,000 rands. And now I'm looking at the census. In 2001, that was 22,000. In 2011 census, that had moved to 60,000. Okay, so 169% increase. But you look at that of the white family, it have moved to where it was to 300 plus. That is. So you can add up at the figures and you realize that as much as there's a growth of 169%, which was the highest if you look at black, coloreds, Indians, but it was again from a very, very low base, from 22,000 to 60,000. We now have a national, very much like what Jamaica has, the Vision 2030. We've come up with a national development plan that is looking at 2030 and really focusing on two issues. Eliminating poverty in South Africa because it's still there, and dealing with job creation. So that's the focus of this national development plan. So all the resources and all the policies of the developmental state are focusing on dealing with those challenges.
What are the key pillars of the South African economy today?
We're looking at services, fortunately, is quite high. It's around 60+% of our economy. Now, within services, we're looking at government services, business and financial services, and personal services. And as you know, those are really on a growth path anywhere globally. Then it will be followed by manufacturing, mining at 12%, mining at 10%, and manufacturing at about 12%. You know the difficulties that we are experiencing with mining, but fortunately in this first quarter of the year, it has actually gone up from where it was last year. But the good thing is that services is the one really that is holding the economy of South Africa, and that's where the growth really is.
Thank you. Now to Jamaica, the PIOJ boss, Colin Bullock, bedeviled by high debt, anemic economic growth, a public sector that is largely agreed inefficient. Somehow we're struggling. When you look at the rest of the world, Mr. Bullock, Jamaica, high development index, but drilling down below those numbers, deep-seated problems. Any lessons to be learned from the experience of, let's say, Brazil, India?
Let me start by greeting all the dignitaries here present and thanking the UNDP for this opportunity. You have correctly identified the context of our difficulties in terms of high debt and low growth, and the issues of growth. I mean, the lessons from the countries that have done well, and the issues raised in the Human Development Report. You know, I found it interesting looking at this report, The Rise of the South, and as Minister Nicholson said, that I think it was Michael Manley 40 years ago who used to speak about South-South cooperation, and perhaps
the new international economic order.
Right, well, perhaps was seen as an idealist. Then, what is different now is that there are now strong poles of growth in the South. My colleagues to the left and the Chinese, who we would have loved to have had on a panel this afternoon. So, in a sense, seeing is believing. So we spoke about it 40 years ago. Now we're having poles of growth in the South, and we're actually believing in these poles of growth. The other interesting thing about this is the focus on equality. I think something that stands out very, very strongly from the Human Development Report is that, in a sense, social transformation is essential to underpinning economic growth. And I think the evidence which is cited suggests that growth may or may not enhance social development, but it is clear that you're not going to be able to sustain economic growth without social transformation. And,
but when you look at the Jamaican case,
yeah,
though,
sure,
in the 1950s and 1960s up to 1971, we were one of the high economic growers of the world. We were the envy of many people across the world.
Yeah.
But we weren't taking care of the human development side of the equation.
Yes.
So we had an administration for 10 years who switched the focus to the distribution. But then we seem to have lost our way. How do we now get back on track? What lessons for us?
And we consider, I mean, what have we learned over the last 50 years? One, when we look at the situation of low growth in Jamaica, we are reflecting on. We speak about low growth, but we associate that with low and declining productivity over the last 40 years. And that low productivity is not unrelated to we have strong human development indicators, but other countries are actually increasing improving their indicators faster than Jamaica actually is.
We're one of the laggards in the region.
And when we drill down below the indicators, if we take the issue in terms of schooling and years of schooling, that indicator, and I just want to say here, with some apology, that indicators are indicators, and not all of them are perfect. So you look at years of schooling, for example, but years of schooling do not reflect educational achievement. So for example, we're saying then that we have a life expectancy, high years of life expectancy, that is there, or GDP per capita, that is there, but the educational achievement which would underpin productivity and prepare the country for economic transformation, that is an issue that we have to address in Jamaica going forward from the present point in time. So what we're saying is that is a very clear lesson for us from the report and from what has happened in Brazil and other countries, that there has got to be that effective social transformation as a means of underpinning economic growth, sustainable economic growth.
All right. I want to go back to the Brazilian ambassador. Lula came to power, and as a socialist, many people were fearful that he would go to far left. But somehow, Lula was able to get the balance right between the economics and the politics. Yes? And one of the results of that, South-South cooperation, IPSA, the precursor to BRICS, India, Brazil, South Africa. Yes? Tell us about how that started and how it emerged.
Well, first I think there is, we tend to oversimplify differences in nations, and I believe that most Brazilians didn't believe that Lula was a risk after we voted for him democratically. And we elected him, and therefore we were hoping that he would become a president and that he would bring more transformation to our economy and underpin this social dimension that we feel so strongly about and that we still believe, because actually we have 6.5 more years of life expectancy. We want to use them for well. We want our citizens with those 6.5 years to live better, those 6.5 years. So I think that there was no risk of radicalization, although, yes, some of that was being read in the press. I think that Brazilian democracy has shown it is extremely strong and resilient, and therefore part of our understanding of democracy is empowering our citizens. On the idea of diversifying the international mix, okay? And I think that India, Brazil, and South Africa have shown with their commitment, and I'm really happy to have my colleagues here on the table for that there is a way of pursuing a different international dialogue and of empowering nations of the South. And I actually appreciated very highly that part of the report, among many others. And I recall that I read, and I found it very interesting, at the summary of the report, it says, a better strategy is responsible sovereignty, whereby countries engage in fair, rule-based, and accountable international cooperation, joining collective endeavors that enhance global welfare. Well, Brazil, Jamaica, India, and South Africa have been saying this for a while now. So we decided that we're not going to say it anymore. We're going to live it. We're going to put this into practice with us, among ourselves, our idea of integration, our idea of rule-based systems. And we have that with IBAS, we have that with CELAC. We are pursuing this idea in different dimensions. Brazil has dialogue with CARICOM. Brazil has dialogue with Africa. Brazil has dialogue with the Arab countries, structured dialogue. And we believe that these different, let's say, geometries of international dialogue showcase the need for reform in international institutions, which I think the report states very clearly. And I think President Lula actually was a front runner of this idea, of the idea that South-South dialogue and South-South cooperation is essential. And we have multiplied our programs of cooperation with the South, including Jamaica, and particularly Jamaica, and with the Caribbean. And modest as they are, they showcase that it is possible.
Tell us a little bit about the technical cooperation you have with, for example, Jamaica. The two leaders a year and a half ago signed that updated technical cooperation agreement. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, actually, I'm happy to have the Director General of the PIOJ here because part of our cooperation is with the PIOJ, and I'm hoping that we can develop it fully. We cooperate with Jamaica in a number of dimensions. The strong dimension of agriculture, because we are firm believers, as Brazil, and as you know, part of our poverty reduction strategy was centered in family agriculture, and the idea that you empower the rural poor by allowing them not to live on subsistence agriculture, but actually of selling their product, of becoming micro-entrepreneurs in the rural area. And so we're trying to transfer part of that experience to Jamaica. We also have a program of cooperation in the area of training. We are hoping to inaugurate later this year in a partnership with Heart NTA, a new training school in Portmore, concentrating on the idea of services for the tourist industry.
You're developing a new training school in Portmore?
Yes. No, Heart NTA already has it. What we're doing is revamping it to strengthen that dimension with cooperation from Brazil. We have cooperation with PIOJ, particularly on the idea of planning and on the poverty reduction programs. And we're obviously open to any other cooperation project in which our experience might be of help to Jamaica. Because Brazil, at the end of the day, is a big Jamaica. And actually, everybody was repeating here that we are 85 with Jamaica. And actually, I must say, if my memory serves me well, I'm actually happy that we finally catched up with Jamaica.
Mr. Ambassador Singh, the cooperation that we have here between India and Jamaica, what are the dimensions to that?
Well, we are offering Jamaica 16 scholarships under India's Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. And so far, the implementation of this program has been excellent. We hope that in future we will increase some scholarship for Jamaica. In addition to that, as far as under the spirit of South-South cooperation, our cooperation with Jamaica is concerned, I would say that India has been participating very actively in implementing certain developmental projects which have finally led to the human development in developing countries, particularly in Africa. For example, in Ghana, I mean, India's engagement in developmental projects has yielded great results. We have implemented projects worth over $500 million in Jamaica, in Ghana. As far as Jamaica is concerned, like India stands for great cooperation and coordination, first among the emerging economies like Brazil, like South Africa, India, China. And in that area, India has already had detailed dialogue with China when their delegation in 2010 came to India, and their experts, they discussed with India's policymakers and experts about India's poverty reduction program. Similarly, on biodiversity and climate change, our experts are in serious dialogue with Brazil. So our engagement and our coordination among the emerging economies and other countries of the South is going well, and I hope that with Jamaica, like India is participating in the developmental projects in other countries, here also we can provide assistance in undertaking certain projects which can finally lead to human development in Jamaica.
Mr. Bullock, how are we doing in terms of making full use of the opportunities from these technical agreements?
We welcome the technical assistance, and the implementation agencies would be the relevant ministries. I think generally the technical assistance is available where we need to, if anything, we need to enhance our own implementation capabilities. But beyond the technical assistance,
that sounds like a euphemism that we're not really doing it very well.
No, we're
enhancing our own.
No. Is it? No, it's not a euphemism.
Okay.
We're saying that the technical assistance is available. The issue is in terms of, in a sense, drawing on it more quickly and implementing it more quickly and more effectively.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not a euphemism.
Ambassador Jaini, how are we doing with the technical cooperation that we have with South Africa?
Okay. We have, at this point in time, there are two specific areas where we're working well with Jamaica. The one is in education. Our Minister of Education was here last year, and really we need to pull all of that into an agreement. However, a lot of work is happening in that space. There's collaboration and cooperation between the University of the West Indies, University of Technology of Jamaica, together with about 4 institutions of higher education in South Africa. And in fact, we just had the 2 delegations from UE and from UTech been invited to South Africa, and they've just come back, and out of that, there will be exchanges around faculty, students, and so forth. So that's the one area which is very interesting and fulfilling. The other, which we've just signed the agreement, is in science and technology. Now, South Africa is ranked in the World Competitiveness Report 38 in the area of innovation with institutions of higher education and in science and technology. We've just won last year already, the SKA, the Square Kilometre Array. That's the largest telescope, and we, together with Australia, but we've got the largest share. So we're looking for scientists, and I think that's another area where we'll be looking at. We've just signed the agreement, as I said, to then see what are the possibilities of making sure that we not only have scientists from other areas, but scientists specifically from the diaspora, because we look at Jamaica as the diaspora being part of that.
What about trading opportunities? One of our leading conglomerates, Grace, is making a push into Ghana, Nigeria. But what about South Africa?
Look, we've had engagement with Grace Kennedy. Let me say, on the wine area, yes, Grace Kennedy is bringing a South African wine to Jamaica. But the truth of the matter, and when we looked at it, is that my understanding is that Grace Kennedy is going to pace itself. If you listen to them, they're saying, we are not there yet, however, this is our next frontier. And they already can see the benefits of being in Africa, of being in the continent. I mean, if you look at the continent and look at the fastest growing economies in the last 10 years, the 10 fastest, 6 of those are in Africa. So I will say Grace Kennedy is on the right track in terms of looking, and Ghana is in those 6. But Grace Kennedy is looking at Ghana and using Ghana as a springboard into West Africa. By the time they've gained experience in doing business in the continent, then they will look at South Africa. But in South Africa, the way I think it'll probably be strategic alliances in terms of what they're looking at. But in terms of going in and understanding that market, Ghana has been their chosen. As much as we say, yes, South Africa can be a gateway, but Ghana equally can be so, and so can be Nigeria. And you have a High Commission here in Jamaica, and I think it offers lots of opportunities.
Yes, Ambassador.
Can I just interject for 1 minute? Because you brought in the issue of trade, and apart from social programs and a strong commitment to inclusion that has driven Brazilian policies in recent years, the other thing that we have always been concerned about is keeping a balanced trading environment. We trade with the U.S., obviously, we trade with China, but we trade with India, we trade with South Africa. 20% of our trade is with Europe, 20% with Africa, 30% with Asia. So Brazil has a very diversified trading environment. And if I was to suggest one idea for Jamaica would be to look into this, to look into diversifying its trading partners. Mm-hmm. Brazil, for one, would certainly welcome that.
And if I could ask, the areas with greatest potential?
I believe in terms of, well, Brazil has a very, I would say, sophisticated offer of products, both agricultural and non-agricultural, industrialized, different things. I believe that in terms of our trading, I think that Jamaica should tap into the idea that there are a number of products that Jamaica produces that have a market in Brazil, provided they look into it. Obviously, not being the traditional market of Jamaica, it might not be easy at first, but my government, for one, is certainly ready to help in looking into areas in which Jamaica could export more. I believe that there is a lot of opportunity for enhancing Brazilian investment in Jamaica, particularly in those sectors that might not be obvious. Certainly we do not invest in tourism, but we do certainly invest in agriculture. Big Brazilian companies in agriculture, global Brazilian companies in agriculture. And therefore, there is an opportunity to strengthen Jamaican agriculture through Brazilian investment, and I think that is one thing that should be looked into. Actually, I know that the Honorable Arnold J. Nicholson is traveling to Brazil shortly.
Who?
Your foreign minister is traveling to Brazil.
Okay.
Sitting right in front of you. And hopefully he will have an opportunity not only to look at how much Brazil has changed in recent years, but also to have a first look at the challenges that we still face and how much we share in terms of challenges that we could learn together, Brazil and Jamaica. But also he will explore the opportunities for increasing not only political dialogue, technical cooperation, but certainly trade and investment.
With the emergence of the South, and we heard the figures and the story, the good news, the implications for the global financial architecture that architecture was created after the Second World War out of Bretton Woods, IMF, World Bank, but now China is sitting on trillions of dollars. Only this week they announced a $3 billion concessionary program for the CARICOM countries, who are with the Chinese in terms of one China policy. A credit to Jamaica back in the 1970s for recognizing that. Now, what are the potential breakthroughs we're facing in the South with the combined resources of South Africa, India, Brazil, the countries that are coming, the Turkeys, yeah? What are the potential breakthroughs are we looking at there? Who want to take that one?
I can.
Okay, good.
You have sitting in this table 3 countries who have been defending very strongly reform of the international system, both at the UN level, particularly at the Security Council, IMF reform, Bretton Woods institutions reforms, change in the way the WTO works. And I think this is a platform that we obviously have been pushing very strongly, but obviously with a lot of resistance from the traditional powers. I don't like the word power, but again, I think the idea of power is a bad idea. But, a number of these traditional countries are keen in keeping the space that they still have. But we're hoping that they will look creatively on the opportunities that changing these institutions opens both for us and for them.
You had asked earlier about IPSA. By the way, IPSA was in 2003, and one of the things that IPSA was quite vocal about was the issue of transformation of the Bretton Woods Institute, the UN Security Councils, the IMFs, and so forth. And we're still saying that, and I think everybody is saying that. But in March, BRICS countries, so the 3 countries together with Russia and China, were meeting in South Africa with the 5th summit of BRICS countries. And in there was an announcement which had already been made, but further work around the BRICS-led development bank that should be finalized fairly shortly. The finance ministers of these countries are working on the details, and further reports will be given in September when they meet. Finances have already been allocated for this, and I do know that while the focus of this bank really will be on emerging economies, on developing economies, and that does not exclude CARICOM countries, including Jamaica. And the good thing is that when the most honorable Prime Minister, Portia Simpson-Miller, was at the AU summit, now in 2 weeks ago, on the 25th, yes, last week, and hopefully there was engagement along those lines. But yes, there is another bank, an alternative, the BRICS-led development bank.
Let me ask the PIOJ boss, China. Huge emerging player, not only on the global stage but also in Jamaica. They are putting down a whole lot of investment in Jamaica. Question, any pushback from the traditional power to the north?
Well, from the PIOJ's point of view, we have not observed any such pushback. I mean, I could see confirmation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I have not seen any of that sort of pushback.
Yes.
That the Chinese investments, properly employed, properly utilized, can be to the benefit of Jamaica, and I don't think that the power to the north would necessarily would regard that as being negative from their point of view of self-interest. But there has been no pushback.
In terms of the nature of the Chinese investment in Jamaica, how critical is that?
Well, in terms of the sheer size and scale, and in terms of what it offers, that it can make a major difference in terms of the generation of economic activity in the near term. I just want to say that major projects are important. It's a lot of investment. It can facilitate output. It can facilitate growth if there are spin-offs in terms of industry, commerce, transportation, and so on. But behind the major projects, we still have to deal with some of the fundamentals which I referred to in this report here. In other words, after the major projects are completed, to be able to sustain growth into the medium to long run, we have got to fix the issues in terms of the empowerment of people, education of people, creation of job opportunities, and so on. Those things have to be fixed if we're going to be able to sustain growth beyond those major projects.
Okay. Before, we're going to have a Q&A, question and answer in a few minutes. I have one more issue to raise with my panelists, and the reports spoke to it. The report speaks to the question of empowering, in particular, women, girls, educating girls, and the dividend that we get from empowering women, educating women. I'm going to begin with His Excellency Pratap Singh of India. We've seen the news recently, India having its issues with women and gender-based violence. How are you carrying along rural, poor women across India in the boom that India is experiencing?
Well, there are some issues relating to women in India, but despite all that, there has been tremendous development in improving human index record of women in India. For example, you can see the situation, you can understand the situation from the very fact that in politics, it is our women who are dominating the scene as of now. Of course, there are incidents which nobody likes or which earn bad name to our society. But as far as empowerment of women is concerned, many measures have been taken by the government to ensure that women not only are empowered, but they are equal partner in the political participation and inclusion in the overall development of the country. Just to strengthen just to improve the condition of women, state governments have been assigned the responsibility of putting adequate measures in place to ensure that no girl child remains without education. And for that, up to 12th standard, all education have been entitled for education free of cost. And I think almost all states, provinces of the Indian Union, they have taken measures that women, girl, child, they will get education free up to 12th standard. And it has improved their educational lot a lot. I mean, now it is women, it is girls who are outwitting boys in education. In every board examination, in all competitive examination, it is women who are on top.
What's the situation with women in South Africa, Master? Especially rural, poor women?
Okay. I spoke about our constitution. So we have what we call a gender commission, and it's embedded within the constitution. So it's an institutional framework to protect the rights of women and children. We're doing particularly well if you look at our what is called the global gender gap index. We rank 16th out of 135 countries, which means we're not doing too bad.
Very good.
But we are particularly proud of Rwanda. You saw on the how Rwanda is doing. But look, there are still challenges in terms of. You'll find that in the public sector, there's a lot of progress, but in the private sector, we've had to legalize the progression of women. So we're using the law to advance women's interests.
The report also speaks to investment in young people, and encouraging participation by people, the development of civil society. Yes. Where are you with that in Brazil, Ambassador Neto?
Well, Brazil, as you know, has had an experience of interrupted democratic rule. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the good thing about this is that we developed a very strong and vibrant civil society movement. So we have a very vibrant political environment. And if you look at Brazilian Congress, you will see that I think about 80% of our members of parliament at the Representatives House have less than 40 years of age. So that is a big number of young people participating in the political sphere. But obviously, we still need to work on the issues of inequality, not only in terms of income, but inequality in terms of access, both in terms of gender, in terms of age. And I think that's a task that we are still need to learn, for instance, from Jamaica. As you can see, the first ambassador of Jamaica to Brazil is a woman. We still have to have a woman as ambassador of Brazil here in Kingston.
Okay. All right, we're going to have the floor opened now for questions and answers from the panel. I think there are microphones available. Just indicate if you wish to ask a question. Yeah? No questions so far. Well, yes, there's one there. Yes. Yes. Just introduce yourself, say who you are, and if you're representing an organization or a country. Hello. Yes.
All right. Yeah, I just wondered.
You are?
Bobby Stevens, sorry.
Yeah.
From Jamaica. Any possibilities right now for joint ventures between technology companies in India and those in Jamaica, in particular in the ICT area? And have you been getting any inquiries or directions in this type of field?
Okay.
Well, as far as inquiries are concerned, so far we have not received any inquiries with regard to that. But as far as our stand is concerned, as I mentioned earlier, we have undertaken certain projects in other developing countries. The same thing we can do in case of Jamaica if any such proposal comes forward.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. There's one there.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hyacinth Douglas from the Jeff Small Grants Program. That is a Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program. It's implemented by the United Nations Development Program, and I'm the National Coordinator. I will direct my question to the South African panelists.
Ambassador
thanks. Some time ago, we read about an article in Africa that aid is dead and it destroys the economy. I heard the rep from Brazil mention the civil society involved. How much do you think, or does grant assistance contribute to a country's development, and how much do you think civil society's involvement is key to driving economic growth?
You mean aid as in donor aid, right? Okay. Look, South Africa doesn't get a lot of aid. Rather, there's more technical cooperation, we are not a big recipient of aid. But talking about, we talk about a people-led development and growth in South Africa. Given the history that we have, you will not succeed if you leave the majority of South Africans out of any plans that you have. So South Africans, civil society is quite vocal. We also have quite a strong and robust media in South Africa. So you'll find that all plans that come about or policy frameworks are always consulted with South Africans until their adoption. You'll find the trade union movement in there giving their input and challenging government in terms of these policy choices. You'll find civil society giving. So bottom line is that you will not have any policy framework for any area of our society or economy without robust civil society engagement. Thanks.
All right. One final question from the floor? No? If you could...
There's somebody. There's
a question. Yes, there's a question. Yeah. And then this will be it. Good evening.
From Secretariat. There is a convention to think of either trade in services or trade in goods as the path for income earning. I just wanted to hear some perspectives from Brazil, particularly in relation to achieving great performance in both services and non-services industries. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about international trade in goods and services, or are we talking of developing services and goods industries within the country?
International.
Both, actually, because I think that the development of the domestic services and goods sectors eventually leads to more performance or better performance internationally.
Very shortly. Brazilian experience has been, in terms of goods, producing goods and services, is that they go side by side and along, and they feed into each other. So, for instance, Brazil, as you know, is a very efficient producer of agricultural products. When you look at the service sector, as you will see that the service sector in Brazil has a very big share of services related to agriculture, and obviously they were developed hand in hand. The more Brazilian agribusiness developed, the more services, agricultural-related services, were also developing. Similarly, when you look at trade, international trade in goods and services, what you see that they also walk, to a certain extent, hand in hand. So a number of Brazilian companies that export services like construction companies also bring with them exports in equipment, exports in materials, and therefore there is, I would say, a virtuous circle in terms of goods and services. So I tend to see, when I see these debates about developing services versus developing industries, I find that these debates seem to miss the point that actually you cannot see, and I think this is the point of the report at the end of the day. Development cannot be seen as a one-dimensional thing. You have to look into everything, and that also has to do with growth.
Thank you. We want to say thanks to the members of our panel. Thanks to you.
Your Excellencies, Mr. Bullock, Mr. Hughes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for a very stimulating and focused panel discussion and the time and effort that clearly went into preparing for this discussion. The questions from the audience have raised some issues pertinent to Jamaica's own development agenda. The 2013 HDR calls for far better representation of the South in global governance systems and points to potential new sources of financing within the South for essential public goods.
Senator A.J. Nicholson, Ministers of Government and Permanent Secretaries, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all for being here this evening and participating in this significant event. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the team at UNDP who worked tirelessly with me over the last several weeks to plan and organize this event. At this point, I would like to invite Dr. Arun Kashyap to come and bring closing remarks.
Well, thank you. I was hoping the facilitators were going to bring it to a closure. But you know, all I can say is, in extending our gratitude to all of you, that there's just few things, if you'll just indulge me, that it's coming very clearly that the role of government, not only in public policies, but also making sure the private sector works effectively in creating jobs. The other side of it is, I just want to share with you something that we are thinking, and one of them is to continue this dialogue, that over this period, that this is just the beginning of the dialogue, but we're going to build upon it to get our other partners, other excellencies who are here from the southern countries to come and join this discussion, so that we can then project to the government of Jamaica some other possibilities as to how we structure a development effectiveness debate and how we all move forward. And just having a dialogue would itself be very effective in moving the messages of the Human Development Report further. Without any further talking from my end, I just do wish to thank the team. I only mentioned that this would be a great idea to share this report with others, but it's the team led by Elsie and Margaret who structured this program, who carried out this program. And with your permission, may I request all the members of the team, and I'm going to call out their names, to kindly stand up so that you can have a look at them and congratulate them on the wonderful work that they did. Starting with Ava Dixon, we've got Mikhail Hughes, Sasha Shirley, Rachel, Karen Morris, Kiran Jones, Angela's probably not here, Akiko and Rebecca are wonderful interns who have joined us, Margaret Jones, Elsie, and we've got these two wonderful also are members of the youth who have joined us, where our staff brought in with us, and that's Emily and Janelle, those wonderful ladies over outside. And of course, Nicole Brown. How could I forget your name? I'm just being reminded. Where are you, Nicole? Please come and join us here. I hope I did not miss out anyone. Thank you to this wonderful team. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. And please join us in a reception right after this.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's up?
And the media, yes.